For nearly 10 years, the CIA searched for the most wanted man on Earth. They had satellites, drones, billions of dollars, and some of the best intelligence officers in the world, yet they still couldn't find him. He didn't use a phone. He didn't use the internet. He didn't leave a digital footprint. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Then, one tiny clue changed everything. A courier, a messenger, a shadow, and that shadow would eventually lead investigators to the world's most wanted terrorist, Osama Bin Laden. This is the story of the biggest manhunt in history and how one of the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth spent nearly a decade chasing a ghost. September 11th, 2001, it began like any other Tuesday. People were heading to work. Flights were taking off across the United States. Millions were starting their day. Then, at 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The world watched in shock. Many believed it was a terrible accident, but 17 minutes later, a second plane slammed into the South Tower. The truth became impossible to ignore. America was under attack. Within hours, nearly 3,000 people were dead. The Twin Towers collapsed. The Pentagon had been hit, and the United States faced the deadliest terrorist attack in its history. As rescue workers searched through the rubble, American intelligence agencies began searching for answers. Who had done this, and where were they hiding? The investigation quickly pointed toward one man, Osama Bin Laden, leader of Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization that had already declared war against the United States years earlier. President George W. Bush made a promise: America would find him. No matter how long it took, no matter where he was hiding, the hunt had begun. Just weeks after the attacks, the United States invaded Afghanistan. Intelligence reports suggested bin Laden was hiding there under Taliban protection. American forces moved quickly. Cities fell. Taliban strongholds collapsed. And by late 2001, the CIA believed they had finally cornered their target. The location was Tora Bora, a remote mountain region filled with caves and tunnels. American aircraft bombed the area relentlessly. Special forces units moved into position. The mountains were surrounded. Escape seemed impossible. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. The hunt was over. Then something unbelievable happened. Osama bin Laden disappeared. When the operation ended, there was no body, no arrest, no proof, nothing. The most wanted man on Earth had slipped away. Somehow, he had escaped. And with that escape, the biggest manhunt in history became even bigger. Months turned into years. The CIA searched everywhere. Phone records were analyzed. Financial transactions were tracked. Suspected terrorists were questioned. Secret surveillance operations expanded across multiple countries. Every lead was investigated. Every clue was examined. But one by one, they all went nowhere. The deeper investigators looked, the more impossible the hunt became. Then analysts discovered something unusual. Bin Laden had changed the rules. Most fugitives eventually make mistakes. They call someone, send a message, use technology. Bin Laden did none of those things. No phone, no email, no internet, no social media, no credit cards, no digital footprint at all. He understood something very important. The less information you leave behind, the harder you are to find. And so, he became a ghost. The CIA could monitor millions of communications every day, yet they couldn't find one man. Some people even began to wonder if he was still alive. Years passed. The trail grew colder, and the world's most wanted terrorist seemed to be disappearing forever. Then, after years of frustration, a small clue appeared. At first, it seemed insignificant. During interrogations of captured Al-Qaeda members, investigators repeatedly heard references to a trusted courier, a messenger, someone responsible for carrying information between senior terrorist leaders. His nickname was Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. At first, analysts didn't think much of it, but something strange happened. Whenever prisoners were questioned about him, they became nervous. Some denied knowing him. Others claimed he wasn't important. A few refused to talk about him at all. That reaction caught the CIA's attention. Why were so many people trying to hide the identity of one messenger? The agency became obsessed. Thousands of intelligence reports were reviewed. Old interviews were re-examined. Tiny details that once seemed meaningless suddenly became important. Investigators came to a conclusion. If they couldn't find bin Laden, they would find the people closest to him, and the courier became their #1 target. The search for the courier lasted years. Analysts tracked rumors. Investigators followed leads across multiple countries. Most of those leads ended in failure, but eventually, they caught a break. The CIA identified the courier's real identity. For the first time in years, they had something concrete, a real target. Surveillance teams began tracking his movements, every trip, every meeting, every location, and then, in 2010, the courier led them somewhere unexpected, Abbottabad, Pakistan. At first glance, Abbottabad seemed ordinary. It was a quiet city. Nothing about it suggested that history was about to change there, but hidden inside the city was something strange. A large compound unlike any other in the neighborhood. The CIA immediately became interested. The walls were unusually high, security was unusually strict, and almost everything about the property seemed designed to keep outsiders away. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger it became. The compound raised countless questions. There were no telephone lines, no internet connection, no visible technology. The residents rarely left. Visitors were almost non-existent, and instead of putting trash outside for collection, the people inside burned it themselves. Why? What were they trying to hide? The CIA placed the compound under constant surveillance. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Analysts studied satellite images. They examined every movement, every shadow, every detail. Then they noticed something unusual. A tall man frequently walked around the courtyard, back and forth, day after day, yet he never seemed to leave the compound. Nobody knew his name. Nobody had a clear photograph. Nobody could confirm his identity. The CIA gave him a nickname, the Pacer. Could this mysterious man be Osama Bin Laden? No one knew, but suspicion continued to grow. The agency had spent years searching for answers, and now they might finally be looking directly at their target. The problem was simple. The CIA still had no proof, no photograph, no recording, no confirmation, only suspicion. Launching a military operation without certainty carried enormous risks. Pakistan was officially an American ally. If the mission failed, the political consequences could be disastrous. American soldiers could die. International relations could collapse. The entire operation could become a global embarrassment. The decision reached President Barack Obama. For weeks, meetings filled the White House. Military leaders debated their options. Intelligence officials presented evidence. Arguments continued late into the night. Some advisors believed the target was bin Laden. Others weren't convinced. The evidence wasn't perfect. But waiting carried risks too. If they delayed, the man they had chased for nearly a decade might disappear again. Finally, Obama made his decision. The raid would move forward. May 1st, 2011. Darkness covered Abbottabad. 2 stealth helicopters crossed into Pakistani airspace. Inside were members of SEAL Team 6, one of the most elite military units in the world. Their mission was simple: enter the compound, find bin Laden, end the hunt. As the helicopters approached, something went wrong. One aircraft experienced problems and crash-landed inside the compound. Years of planning were suddenly at risk, but the mission continued. The operators moved quickly, room by room, floor by floor. The tension increased with every step. Nobody knew what waited behind the next door. Seconds felt like minutes. The team climbed higher, closer to the top floor, closer to the target, and then, after nearly 10 years of searching, they found him, Osama Bin Laden, the world's most wanted terrorist. The manhunt was over. Ending. When people remember this story, they usually remember the raid, the helicopters, the commandos, the dramatic ending. But the raid wasn't the real story. The real story was everything that came before it. The years of failure, the dead ends, the endless intelligence reports, the analysts who refused to give up, the investigators who followed a clue that most people would have ignored, a courier, a messenger, a shadow. The CIA didn't find Bin Laden because of luck. They didn't find him because of some magical piece of technology. They found him because they followed one small thread for nearly a decade, and eventually, that thread led them to the answer. For almost 10 years, Osama bin Laden managed to stay hidden from the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth. But even the most careful fugitives make mistakes. Even ghosts leave footprints. And in the end, those footprints led straight to him. The biggest manhunt in history was finally over,